Well, how are we getting on with the building of Brand Fred? Brand Fred is coming to life. Fred, the intuitive marketer, has controlled a couple of value exchanges, food for a sweater, twice. He's done so by setting objectives, to secure food in exchange for a Fred sweater. He's done so by identifying the value that Elvis, his target, his counterparty, his customer, his consumer, wants to part with his value, food. He has produced the value that Elvis needs. He's communicated to Elvis that he has what Elvis needs, a sweater. And he has persuaded Elvis to exchange his value, food, for Fred's value, a sweater. And he's done it twice. The second time he's labelled the sweater. The sweater is branded a Fred sweater. We can already discern a process, the creation of a brand. Recalling a previous class, you will remember that a brand faces Janus-like in two directions. It has value for one class of stakeholder, customers, consumers, etc., who see value in the brand for themselves, and it has value for another class of stakeholder, the owner of the brand. How does Brand Fred stack up on these counts? Brand Fred has some value to Elvis. He's the only customer so far for Fred sweaters, the product class in which Brand Fred plays. 2 Brand Fred sweaters have graced Elvis's torso, and he's pretty pleased with them. You might say that another sweater with a Brand Fred label will likely please Elvis. He's predisposed to swap food for a Fred sweater on a future occasion. Brand Fred, for this reason, already has some value to its owner, to Fred. The next sweater he knits and labels Brand Fred will be more likely to be seen as a value worth acquiring in any future exchange of values. But Brand Fred is very young indeed, a baby, an embryo even at this stage. So let's follow the brand to its next stage. There were a lot of guests at Elvis's daughter's wedding. Elvis is well connected, and several of them remarked on Elvis's splendid white sweater, and noted that Elvis did not turn blue with cold during the speeches, which were of course interminable. Cave weddings are no different from 21st century weddings, alas. Some of the admirers of the white sweater noted the label, and a few even came up to Fred and said, "Did you really knit that beauty, Fred? And even, might you knit one for me?" It just so happened that one of the admirers was Fred's landlord, who shall be known as George. Now this matters. With no significant hunting income recently, Fred has fallen into arrears with his rent. The family is now well fed, but is facing eviction from their cosy cave. Time for an exchange of value, thinks our budding brand manager. A Brand Fred sweater for George in exchange for a year's rent. You can imagine the conversation. "I want a year rent-free in my cave, George. You want a sweater. What colour is your favourite? I have your sweater. Let's exchange." The exchange is made. The landlord wears a Brand Fred sweater everywhere. The brand is now off and running. But it has some ways to go and a few pitfalls ahead. So stay with us as we scope the building of Brand Fred further.